Hello friends, welcome to IAS in YouTube channel. In these videos, we are going to discuss about CRUD operations in collections. This video is continuations of the previous one. In previous videos, we discuss about lot about what is the use of at rest controller, what is the use of at path variable, what is the use of at request mapping and get mapping, post mapping, delete mapping, and put mapping. In these videos, we are going to perform the same operation, but in the collections we are going to use the entity instead of using the primitive data. In previous videos, we saw about performing the CRUD operations on the primitive data, that is string, right? In this video, we are going to see same the CRUD operation in the collection by using the entity class. Let's see how to implement this. As you know, this is the flow of the Spring Boot. First, we are going to write all the mapping in controller class. That class should be annotated with at rest controller, and that should be followed by services class. Controller class transfer the data to the services class. In the services class is annotated with at service annotations. So here we are going to write all the logics. So for performing the CRUD operations on the collections, controller and services is more than enough. When services is more than enough. Let's dive into the implementations part of how to implement the CRUD operations in the collections using entity classes. Here you see, we already created the controller and services. So now I'm going to create one more packages that is called entity package. Okay. So in this entity classes, we are going to create one class that is student class. This student class will contain following field, that is private, int, register number, and private string name. That should be followed by private string department number. So always you need to remember one thing. Whenever you are going to create a variables on the entity classes, that should be in camel case. So for this, I'm just going to create an empty constructor, and that should be followed by constructor with argument, and that should be followed by getter and setter for all the field. Now you see, we created the entity classes. We are going to pass all the data to the entity classes. From that, we are going to store the data into the collections. So for that, I'm just going to create an endpoint. So I'm going to create a new controller, that is student controller. Okay. So as I already told that each classes should be annotated with at rest controller when it is going to perform the actions on the rest based data, and that should be followed by request mapping. So it is endpoint to call this particular class student. Okay. So here you see, so we created the control classes. Now I'm going to create the services classes. So student service. This classes will annotated with at service annotations. Here only we are going to write the logics, so that I'm just going to create collections. This collection is going to hold the which type? Student entity type, student, and we are going to create an instance of this. New array list is going to store student entity. Okay. So now you see, we are going to write all the CRUD operations based annotations. First one is going to be a post mapping. Here I'm going to use /add. Okay. So public So it's going to return list of students. When we are going to add the particular students entity along with the new data which we added, it is going to return all the data which is present on the collections. So we are going to annotate this with at post mapping, and we are using this endpoint as slash add. So we are creating the method name as add student. Now you see, previously we used path variable to read the values from the URL, but now we are going to pass the values on the postman body. On this particular locations, we are going to pass all the data. So how to read those data? So by using at request body annotation, request body of which type? So this is a student type, right? Okay, so we are going to pass all the data to the entity classes. So this entity classes will carry all the data, right? Okay, so we are going to pass student entity classes, and we are going to create an instance of it. Now you see, as I already told that, so here this controller class will communicate to the services class. This services class is going to perform all the operations. So this controller classes know this where is the services class, right? Okay, so then only it can able to access all the method which is present on the services class. So we are going to annotate this class by using at auto void annotation, and we are going to inject the dependencies. We want to perform all the operations, right? Okay, so we're having two student services classes. So I'm just going to delete this. Okay, so this one also I'm just going to delete. These are the examples which we used on the previous session. Okay, so now you see we are getting this warning messages. Okay, so now we need to mention where the student services class is located. So we are just hand over this task to the auto add annotation. Auto add annotation will take care of all these things, creating the object and injecting the dependencies. So now you see we are having the method in the services class. So we are that method is going to add the values, whatever the values we are passing through this by using this slash add. Okay. So now we are going to call this student services dot. So which method we are having on the student services? Let's check it. So here still we are not created any methods. Now you see we are going to create the method. Okay, so here we need to return list of students. Why? Because I'll tell you later. Okay, so add student 1 is going to receive which type? Student type. Okay, so now I'm going to add the values. Okay, so when I'm going to receive this value through argument. Okay, so this argument will hold the student entity, that is the student details. Now we need to add the students details into the array list. Okay, so how we are going to add? So we are going to use that is add method, right? Okay, so add inside this. I'm just going to pass the student classes. Now you see this students classes is returning list of values. Okay, so or particular order. Now we return list of orders, so that we simply call the array list object, that is ls. Okay, so now you see what we return inside this method. Okay, so first you see in the classes, this services class is annotated with at service annotation. That should be followed by we created the array list. This array list is going to hold the student data. So here we are creating the method. Okay, so this method is success specifier. It's returning list of students. The method name is add students. Okay, so it's going to accept student entity, that is this data, as an argument. Okay, so once it receives the argument, it's going to add this value. Okay, so by using the array list object ls dot add, so we are going to add the student. Then finally we returning all the values which is present on the array list. Okay, so now you see we are going to call this method on this endpoint. Okay, so here you see we are going to call this particular method. Okay, so add student. Okay, sorry, add student 1. Here we are going to pass the student. Here you see in the receiving end, okay, so we are receiving the student as a student entity type. So we are passing the student entity to this add student one, which is present on the services class. This services class, what it is going to do is going to add the student data. Now you see, we are going to run this program. Let's check whether the data is get added into the array list or not. So the program is executed successfully on the port 8080. So we are going to use the Postman. Already I explained much about the Postman on the previous video. In case if you don't know anything about the Postman, just go through the previous videos. Here you see, we need to call this particular classes. This classes is annotated in the request mapping. We need to use slash student. Is a main URL to call the particular controller, and we need to call this particular method by using slash add. Okay, so now in the request body, we need to pass student entity type. Okay, so moving to the student entity, here you see the first variable is registration number. Okay, so inside this double quotes, we need to give the registration number, and then value of the registration number is 1. And next thing, we are going to pass the name, and the name which I am going to pass is Vinod Kumar Silva Arst. Okay, so now I'm going to pass another data, that is department number. I'm just going to pass CSC. I'm going to send the request now. Let's see whether this data is get added into the data, collections or not. Yes, now you find this data is now get added into the collections. Now I'm going to pass another set data. Okay. So now I'm going to send the request. Now you see we are passing another set of data. So here this registration number we are going to automatically increment whenever the new data is get added into the collections. How it is possible? So for that, the simple thing, we are going to create one variable. This variable is going to incremented by 1 each time when the data is going to be get added into the collections. That is, so we are going to create one variable, and we are going to initialize the values to the variable as 1. And then whenever we are going to add the values, so this value will be incremented by 1. So for that, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create one variable which is static. And then why? Because static. Okay, so this variable need to be get created. Okay, so whenever there is a new instance is created, it's going to be incremented on the same location. So that static in, I'm going to use static int id equal to 1. Now whenever new data is get added, this value will be going to incremented by 1. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use the instance of this student classes. Okay, so now I'm just going to get the instance of it, student dot set registration number will be going to incremented by 1. Okay, so that is id is already 1. Okay, so when there is a new values is get incremented, I'm just going to increment by 1, and I'm going to add those value into it. Now we are going to perform same operations, but now we are not going to pass the registration number. Okay, so here you see, So in this body section, we pass the registration number. Now I'm going to press send button. Now you see this registration number is added by 1. Now I'm just going to perform another insertion operation by passing another data. Okay, so now here also I'm not going to pass the registration number and click send button. Okay, so now you see this registration number values is keep on incrementing whenever we are going to add the new values. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to uh, perform the retrieval operation. That is retrieving the values based on the registration number or retrieving the values based on particular ID. Okay, so how it is possible? This class should be annotated with at get mapping, and inside this I'm just going to pass slash view student by ID. Okay, so now I'm just going to or view all students. All students. Okay. Now I'm going to create a method which is the public access specifier. It is going to return all the students, so that list of students and view method name I'm just going to create as view all student. Okay, so this method is not going to accept any argument, so that I'm not going to pass any values on here. So now we created endpoint for this particular operations. Now we are going to move to the services class. So inside the services class, I'm going to uh, return list of students, so that I'm creating the return type as list of student, and this is going to return get all students. Get all students. So here also we are not going to pass any argument, but what it is going to return? It is going to return all the students. Okay, so that is what are the values which is present on the array list, that value only is going to pass, so that I am going to give ls. Okay, so now we need to call this particular method on this inside this controller. So I'm just going to use return, and then I'm just going to inject the dependencies for the services class student services, and then I'm going to call get all students. Now you see I'm just going to stop the execution and rewrite this program. Okay, so now you find it's executing successfully. It's executing successfully. Now I'm moving to this add method. Again, I'm going to pass all the values. Why? Because when we are going to start and stop, the collection is going to clear all the data, whatever the data it's having. Okay, so it's not a database we are storing, and it is going to store it in somewhere permanently. Okay, so each time when you're going to stop and start, we need to insert all the operation. Now you see all the data is present now. Now we are going to call the endpoint view all the students instead of add. So what operation we need to call? Here we are using get mapping, so that we need to use get. Okay, so now we don't want to pass any values on the body tag, so that I'm just removing it. I'm just sending the request. Now you see we got this all the value. Now we are going to retrieve the students by ID. How it is possible? Okay, so now we are going to pass some values to the services class. This services class is going to return the values. Okay, so for that I'm just going to write the method, that is public So it's going to return only one values, right? Okay, so that I'm just going to use the instance student, that is get student by ID. So here we need to receive the values, right? Okay, so this ID is int, so that I'm just going to use int ID, and then inside this I'm going to write the logic. Okay, so it's going to return null if the values is doesn't exist. Okay, so I'm just going to create a method, and then inside this for student s colon ls. Okay, so ls is a complete array list object. It's called the complete data, right? Okay, so here we are going to check this condition. If s dot, okay, so that is we are checking by id, right? Okay, so s dot get register number. If the register number is equal to, okay, sorry, is equal to the values which we are receiving from here. If it is match, okay, so if it is match, it's going to return the values, that is return yes. Okay, or else what it is going to do, it is going to return null. Okay, so it's going to each iterations, it's going to pass, the ls is holding all the data, right? So each iterations is going to pass the values to the s. Okay, so whenever it's get inside, it take the first data, it's going to check whether the first data registration number is equal to the values which we are passing. If it is get match, it is returning the value. So otherwise, again, it's going to move to the next locations. It's going to check the Ashok Kumar data. Is the Ashok Kumar ID is going to match with the registration number which is having on the S object. Okay, so if it is matching, it's returning it. Otherwise, what it is going to do, it is going to return null. Okay, so then we're going to write the logic return null. Got it? Okay. So now we are going to call this particular method in the controller class. We are going to pass the ID and we are going to check it. That is at get mapping annotations. Inside this slash view student by ID slash flower bracket ID. Okay. So now we are going to call this particular method which is present inside the classes, inside the services classes, to return the matching student ID. Okay. So for that, I'm going to create a method. It's going to return only one particular student's details. So students get, so we can write any method name, any method name. Okay, so it doesn't matter. Get student by ID. Okay, so here we need to read the values which is present on the URL. So which annotations we are going to use? So we are going to use at path variable annotation. Okay, so in case if you have any doubts on this what is path variable annotation, please watch the previous videos. Okay, so this ID is an integer, so that I'm just going to use the int. We need to use the same variable name, so that I'm going to use a variable name as ID, and then here I'm going to call the services method, that is student services. Okay, so this method will contains the get student by ID. Here we are going to pass the values ID is going to check whether this particular student ID is present on the array list or not, right? This ls is holding all the values. So for each iteration, it's going to first is going to pass the Vinod record. This s is going to hold the Vinod record. In that we are going to fetch the registration number only, and we are going to check this value is matching with this or not. If it is matching, we are returning it, or else we are going to return null. For each iteration, it's going to keep on checking one by one data. Okay, so first is going to pass the Vinod record, and it is going to check the registration number with this values which we are passing. Then Ashok Kumar data, and then if it is none of them is get matched, it's going to return null. Okay, so now we are going to check this condition. I'm going to stop and rerun this program. Now you see the program is executing successfully. As I already told that, so each time when we are going to stop and start, okay, so all the data which is present on the array list will go on. Okay, so it will be get deleted. First, we are inserting Ashok record, sorry, Vinod record. So then we are passing Ashok record. Now we are going to retrieve all the students. Now we are going to call one particular students. For that, we need to use a endpoint, that is view students by ID and the postman. Here we need to pass the ID number. Okay, so here you see we are having 1 and 2. So first I am going to pass 1. Here you see we got the out. Now, hope you understand how to retrieve the students based on the ID. There is an alternative way to write this one. So we can go with this Java 8 concept. In Java 8 concepts, we are going to retrieve the values in uh, not more than 4 or 5 lines. So how to write this particular Java 8 thing? Now you see we are going to write the return statement, and then ls is nothing but array list. It's going to hold all the data, right? Now we need to convert this into the string. Okay, so now we need to convert into the string. Then each terminal we are going to filtering the data and we are passing to the next terminal. Okay, so inside this filter it is just like if condition only. Filter is nothing but if condition only. Okay, so here we are going to check that is um, just consider STUD. Okay, so I'm just consider student. STUD is nothing but is student's record. Okay, so in the student, I'm just going to check if student STUD dot get registration number. If the registration number is equal to, okay, so if it is equal to registration number, mm, how can I write? Okay, so double equal to and then ID. Yes. Okay, so because why we are not get the equal methods on here means it is an integer. Okay, so then we are going to use a find first. It is going to return the first value, and then that should be followed by or else, and then I'm going to return null. Right. Okay, so find first. Okay. So now what we are doing on here means, okay, so first the ls is holding all the record. Now we are going to convert this into the string. Okay, so then we are going to convert this into filtrations. It is simply, okay, so in Java, how we are going to write the statement means, I'm just going to write it on here. Okay, so the filter is nothing but if conditions. Okay, so here, how we are going to write in Java previously means we written like this. If to std dot, so get registration number equal to ID. Okay, so instead of using if, we are going to use filter concept because we are using Java 8 concept. Okay, so instead of writing lengthy boilerplate code, okay, so we can finish all the concepts in minimum of line. Okay, so this is the alternative way of writing these conditions. Okay, so getting the students based on the ID. So now we are going to save this program. So filtering it and find first, it's going to return the matching value on in case if none of them get matched, we are going to return null. Okay, so here this is all the suggestion. This is all the suggestions. Okay, so string is telling that it is going to hold the student entity as a string, and then filter stud is nothing but student entity. Find first is going to return the values or else it is going to return null. And stop this program and rerun this program. Let's check whether we are getting the right output or not. Now the program is get executed. Now moving to this. So again I'm just going to inserting the values. Vinod, and then body tag and Ashok, and then retrieving all the records. Yes, Now we're going to retrieve student based on the ID. Now it is need to call this particular method and it is going to perform all the filtration operations and it is going to return the values. Let's check whether we are getting the values or not. Yes, we got the value, right? Okay, so this is the way how we are going to, that is the other way, how to write the streaming operation for performing the filtrations. Now we are going to perform the delete operation. Okay, so first we are going to write the logics on the services classes. Okay, so what this delete operation is going to do, it is going to return all the list of students. Why? Because once this data is get deleted, we need to know what are the remaining data which is present over there. Okay, so I'm just going to create a method name as delete data. Okay, now here we are going to return return ls. Here inside this, we want to remove the data from the collection, means we need to call the method which is called as remove. Inside this, we need to pass the id. Okay, so it is going to receive the id as an argument because array list is going to store the locations on the index only. Okay, so right, each index is going to hold one particular set of data. Okay, so we are going to pass the index as an argument instead of id. Okay, so now ls dot remove. Inside this, I'm just going to pass the index. Okay, so once it get removed, it is going to return all the list of students which is remaining on the array list. So now we need to call the delete data method from the controller. Okay, so that I'm just going to use the delete mapping. Inside this, I'm just going to call the URL delete records. Delete records, and I'm going to pass the ID, and I'm going to pass the ID. Okay, so sorry, index. Okay, so index. So now I'm going to return type. I'm just going to make it as list of students. Okay, why? Because in the services class also we use to return this list of students. Okay, so at the receiving end also we need to return the list of students. So delete student. Okay, so now I'm just going to receive the values from the URL. So I'm just going to use a path variable. Okay, so and then int index. Okay, so we need to read the values which is present on the URL, so that I'm going to use our path variable annotation. Inside this return, I'm just going to call the student services, because student services having this method. Which method? This method. This method is what is the purpose of this method? It is going to delete the record. Okay, so I'm going to call student services dot delete data. Here I'm going to pass the index as an argument. Okay, so this method is going to call this particular method which is present on the services file. So now I'm going to run this program, save it, and we're going to rerun this program. Okay, done. So it's executing. Now I'm going to perform all the post operation one by so again. Okay, so I'm just going to pass first record, and then second record, and then I'm just going to pass some other value, Sam. Third record. Finally, it will contain three records. Now I am going to use get all students details by calling this view all students. It's returning this one, and I am going to call view students by ID. I am going to pass the student ID as 3. Now you see we got this data. Now we are going to perform the deleting operations. Here you see we need to use at delete mapping annotation. So we are going to call at del in the we are going to call this URL delete mapping URL delete records. Here we need to pass the index location. This is ID, register number is ID. We need to pass the index locations. So totally how many records we are having? Totally we having 3 records. Okay, so this one is going to store it on index of 0, and this one is going to store it on index of 1, and this one is going to store it on index of 2. So we need to delete values based on the index only. Okay, so that I'm just going to choose delete options. From here, I'm just going to call the controller, that is student controller. The control will be transferred to this particular classes. From here, we are going to call this delete records, and we are going to pass the index value. Okay, so I'm just going to pass the index value 2. Okay, so now you see it's going to return the remaining values which is present on the array list. Okay, so hope you understand the CRUD operations on the collections. And there is another way. So I want to tell you one thing. There is another way. So we can. I already told that we can use auto air in 3 ways. One is field value. Another one is by using the constructor. Another one is by using the setter getter. Okay. So now you see, I'm just going to create a constructor for this method, and I'm going to pass the student services and argument. Okay. So for that, I'm just going to create a private variable, private and final. Okay. Okay. So now why it is throwing warning message means we are declaring this variable as a final. If the final variable is declared means we need to initialize the values on here itself. If it is not, we need to initialize the values inside the constructor. Okay, so here you see, I'm just going to create a constructor. So for this particular variable, here you see, now this warning is when. So there is other way, right? Okay, so auto where we can use it on 3 ways. One is on the field variable, another one is constructor, another one is setter. So I'm just going to use auto where on here. Okay, so it's going to create a bean for this particular student services classes. Okay, so that you can able to access it. This is another way. The program will work same as so what we executed previously. Hope this video is helpful for you. How to perform the CRUD operations on the collections. So here you see we perform the insertion operation and retrieving all the students, and we return retrieving the students based on the ID, and we perform the deleting operations too. Okay, for all these operations we having the endpoint on the controller for performing the adding operations, for performing the get all the students details, and also for performing the that is retrieving the data based on the ID, and then deleting the record based on the index locations. So hope this video is helpful for you. If you like this video, please click the subscribe and bell button, and don't forget to share this video with your friends if you like this video. Thank you. Thanks for watching.